The Deathvoid Academy by Jansen Davies. Chapter 1. The Nameless Moon. The shuttle broke through the veil of dark matter clouds with a low hum, gliding silently toward the jagged surface of a barren moon without a name. Beneath its hull, sprawling across the shadowed terrain, lay the facility known only to the galaxy's most covert operatives, Deathvoid Academy. Inside the craft, 27 young women sat in rigid silence, their skin shades ranging from lunar silver to amber, obsidian, and coral blue. Some had scales instead of skin, others communicated in pulses and pheromones. Yet one thing bound them. They were all dead once, now reanimated, reconstructed, and reassigned. The air was heavy not just with recycled oxygen, but with anticipation. Some looked hollow-eyed, others bristled with defiant energy. There were no names spoken here, not yet. Until they proved themselves, they were numbers and ranks. Among them sat a girl who hadn't yet settled on silence. Her gaze was alive, curious, unafraid. Her name had been Lionia once. On her home planet, she was buried under volcanic ash after a quake. No one came looking, but something had found her. She clutched the hilt of the ceremonial blade given at reanimation. It was not a weapon, but a reminder that death had claimed her, and that it could do so again without hesitation. The shuttle touched down, locking into the receiving bay with a hiss of depressurized air. The bay doors peeled open, revealing a wide hangar cloaked in burnished steel and pulsing neon veins. Guards in armor that shimmered like oil stood on either side, faces hidden beneath mirrored visors. Not to protect the academy from the outside world, nothing remained to threaten it, but to ensure the cadets never forgot the rules. As the young women filed out, a voice echoed through the vast space. Not spoken, but telepathic. Not requesting, but commanding. Welcome, cadets of the Deathvoid. You are no longer what you were. You are what we tell you the galaxy needs. Lionia stepped into the lightless academy and felt it, the gravity not of the moon, but of fate. Somewhere in this brutal sanctum, surrounded by the broken and reborn, she would become something else. Not just a corpse given motion, a soldier, a leader, or perhaps a spark that reignites the soul of the Deathvoid itself. Chapter 2. The Broken Choir. Training began before the solar cycle could blink. No sunrise, no dusk, just the Academy's interior illumination, fluctuating in rhythm with the instructor's whims. The light didn't comfort, it interrogated. Lionia stood in Formation Alpha with the other cadets in her platoon. The uniforms were identical, white synthesis armor laced with bioluminescent threads that adapted to each body's physiology. No personalization, no insignia, only numbers. But Lionia wasn't built for blending in. Her eyes shimmered with a phosphorescent hue that couldn't be dulled. She was the anomaly, active before protocols, asking questions that weren't supposed to be asked. Their drill commander, a spectral being named Stavik, had once been a sentient gas cloud before being bound into a corporal shell. She hovered rather than walked, her voice a jagged echo inside the mind. Today you will fight each other. Tomorrow you will fight the galaxy. They were ordered into combat pairs. No weapons, just body versus body. It wasn't about skill. It was about rage, restraint, desperation, and memory. Linoy's opponent was Seren, a humanoid with granite-like skin and calcified arms that could split steel. Seren didn't wait for a signal. She lunged with a predator's grace, her blows thunderous. Lionia evaded, not with speed, but with rhythm. She watched Seren's movements, timing her dodges and counters, not for victory, but for understanding. When the match was called, drawn by protocol override, Lionia extended a hand. Seren stared, then walked away. That was the first seed. By week's end, Lyonia had engaged not just in combat, but in conversation. She asked cadets why they had agreed to reanimation, what they remembered, what they feared. Most didn't answer. A few did. She discovered that Cadet Tavi dreamed every night of the desert where she'd been abandoned. That Rinix, the six-eyed linguist from Nouvelon, couldn't feel sadness because her emotional centers had been replaced with tactical software. And that Mira, a bipedal synth with feathers made of glass, had never really died, but was reconstructed anyway, her original self deemed non-essential. Every story was a fracture. Every fracture begged for glue. It was Lyonia who began addressing her squad by name rather than number. It was Lyonia who held Mira's shards after a training accident, who helped Rinix rewire herself to experience grief, and who taught Seren that pain didn't always mean weakness. By the end of the second lunar cycle, Stavik summoned her privately. "You are not following protocol." "Protocol wasn't built for unity," Lyonia said. "Unity wasn't the mission. Maybe it should be." And Stavik, who had never smiled, dissolved into smoke rather than reply. Chapter 3. Black Star Protocol. 3 lunar cycles in, the Academy ceased to feel like a prison. It had become something far stranger, a laboratory of possibility, haunted by resurrection and unity. Linoy's growing influence hadn't gone unnoticed. She hadn't just survived Deathvoid's brutal regimen. She'd reshaped it, and in doing so, she thrived. One morning, the cadets awoke not to Stavik's usual mental broadcast, but to silence. Lights remained dim, rations unmoved, and the training halls locked. Then came the alert. Black Star Protocol engaged. All active cadre report to Ascent Bay. None of the cadets knew what Black Star was, but the Academy's mood shifted. Whispered memories, fragments of Deathvoid Core legends, spoke of tests that went beyond simulated conflict, missions into the galaxy's neural shadows. Lyonia, flanked by Seren, Tavi, Rinix, and Mira, stepped into Ascent Bay together. It was a place they had never seen, crystalline glass floors reflecting unsteady expressions, ceiling portals aimed toward the stars, and at its center, the vessel of trials, a sentient transport engineered for missions that defied logic and sometimes reality. Commander Stavik, now fully corporeal in swirling armor, addressed them aloud for the first time. Deathvoid Core is not defined by survival. It is defined by obedience during chaos. She pointed to Lyonia. "You will lead this mission." "Mission?" Lyonia asked. "But we haven't graduated." "Graduation is obsolete. The galaxy doesn't wait." The task was delivered without further ceremony. A derelict space station orbiting a neutron star had begun transmitting untraceable distress signals. No life signs, no coordinates, just emotion. Cadets were to investigate, record anomalies, and, if necessary, neutralize threats. Black Star wasn't just a mission, it was a crucible. Inside the vessel, Lyonia took the captain's chair, a rare privilege in Deathvoid's hierarchy. The crew aligned behind her, not because she had demanded loyalty, but because she had earned trust. As the vessel detached from the Ascent Bay and launched beyond the moon's gravity, Lyonia watched their home shrink behind them. Not for the first time, she wondered if this was what rebirth truly meant. Not returning, but choosing what came next. Mira fluttered to her side, glass feathers resonating quietly. "Do you think we'll find the source?" "I think," Lyonia said, "we're about to find out what Deathvoid really is." The stars were silent, but only on the surface. Somewhere among them, memory waited, and Lyonia was no longer afraid. Chapter 4. A Ghost in the Core. The ghost station, known in fragmented records as Ether's Womb, drifted on the edge of gravitational chaos, caught in the pull of a dying star whose heat had long ceased to burn. From afar, it looked abandoned. Up close, it felt alive in a way that defied anatomy. The vessel of trials docked with a magnetic hiss. Lyonia led the team into a corridor lined with shattered vis screens and biopods full of nutrient gel, now coagulated into crystal-like husks. No bodies, no signs of life, yet the emotion radiated. Fear, longing, rage, every heartbeat a whisper in their bones. Rinix accessed a terminal, her 6 eyes adjusting to overlapping spectra. This place, it didn't go dark naturally. Something severed the neural grid from inside. Mira's feathers flared, catching a residual current. Her voice turned glassy. It's speaking to me, not in language, in loss. They moved deeper. Seren guarded the rear, silent and sharp-eyed. Tavi placed motion beacons, mapping their trail. Lyonia pressed forward, drawn by a sound no one else heard, a low hum like a drumbeat suspended in metal. In the central chamber, the source awaited them, not a creature, not a machine, but a girl, or the memory of one. She hovered above the station core in a cocoon of fractured reality. Her features flickered, human, alien, pixel, flame. She wasn't alive, but not entirely dead. She was the first cadet of Deathvoid, the prototype. "Welcome," she said. "I've been waiting for you." Her name was Solène. She had volunteered for resurrection before the Academy even had a name, and she had been left behind when her soul refused assimilation. Solène spoke in riddles and memories, offering visions of the true genesis, how Deathvoid began not as salvation, but as a test of what a mind could endure after death. Lyonia listened, not as a soldier, but as someone who had started asking why. Solène made them an offer. She could integrate their consciousness into the station, give them permanent access to all core intelligence, upgrade their abilities, at a price. "You will never return as who you were," she said. "Only shadows of yourselves will remain." Lyonia turned to her squad, Mira shimmering and somber, Rinix decoding emotion with trembling hands, Seren battle-scarred but open, Tavi whispering prayers to gods that no longer answered. None of them fled, but neither did they surrender. "We came to learn," Lyonia said, "not to disappear." She reached into the ether field and retrieved something, an object shaped like nothing, but filled with understanding. A crystallized choice, a fragment of Solène's pain. They returned to the vessel changed, but not erased. Back at the Academy, Stavik met them in silence. "You disobeyed the protocol." "We followed purpose," Lyonia replied. "Then you are ready." Chapter 5. The Heart of the Void. The final cycle of training passed like the shadow of a comet, swift, cold, inevitable. Linoy's squad, no longer just cadets, returned from Ether's womb not with glory, but with truth. The words of Solène haunted them, not in fear, but in clarity. Deathvoid was not merely a military project, it was a metaphysical experiment, weaponizing the reanimated not just as soldiers, but as vessels for transformation. On the eve of deployment, Stavik summoned the graduating class into the central atrium, where the walls shimmered with the visages of every Deathvoid Corps member who had ever transcended cadetship. Not their faces, their decisions. Lyonia stepped forward as representative, flanked by Seren, Rinix, Tavi, Mira, and others who had begun to trust again, not in systems, but in each other. "You are cores now," Stavik intoned, "but what you become next is not mine to decide." She handed Lyonia a black insignia, a spiral swallowing starlight. "Lead them." Their mission launched within hours. Not to conquer, not to execute, but to intervene. On the rim of a war-torn nebula, refugees from dozens of systems cried out for aid, people who had been abandoned, presumed dead, scattered by conflict and forgotten by diplomacy. The Deathvoid Corps descended like revenants reborn. They brought not just weapons, but forgotten memory, and in seeing them, these reanimated cadets of sorrow and strength, the galaxy began to ask different questions about who was truly lost and who could still be found. Lyonia stood atop the command deck of their mobile base, the Sister's Blade, watching displaced ships form orbit around their station like petals closing in prayer. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. The Death Void had never been about erasing the past. It had always been about choosing the future. And under Linoy's watch, the Void would no longer be a tomb. It would be a new beginning. Or the end.